Vault-Tec. Vault-Tec's stated goal was simple, patriotic, warm and fuzzy: save the American people. Their actual goal was a total monopoly on the survival of mankind. They believed that if they controlled all surviving humans on the planet, they would have outlived every competitor and eliminated all conflict. The Fallout TV series strongly implies they were involved in escalating the Sino-American War into total nuclear devastation, operating under the assumption that the only people left alive would be sealed inside their own facilities. Whether Vault-Tec actually launched the first bombs remains one of the franchise's great unresolved questions, but their willingness to do so is not. Rather than design the vaults as large nuclear bunkers to save communities, the vaults were secretly built around horrific experiments. According to Fallout co-creator Tim Kaine, the original purpose of these experiments was to test technologies and social conditions needed for a potential interstellar colonization project overseen by the Enclave. But in practice, many were simply designed to observe human suffering under extreme conditions, with only a small minority designed to actually protect people, and even those existed as control populations for the experiments. Only 17 of the 122 vaults were control vaults, meaning only 17 were transparently operated as advertised. The rest were laboratories dressed up as lifeboats. Vault 68 had 999 men and 1 woman. Vault 75, placed underneath Malden Middle School, separated children from their parents at the door and had Vault-Tec security execute the parents. The surviving children were then tested mentally and physically until their 18th birthday, at which point their genes were harvested, they were killed, or they were recruited by the science team. Vault 11 required its inhabitants to select one person to sacrifice every single year. They were told that unless they did this, everyone in the vault would be killed. When only 5 survivors remained, they discovered that the whole sacrifice requirement had been a ruse. No one had to die at all. Had they ever refused to sacrifice a member of their vault, a Vault-Tec message would have played, commending them for their commitment to human life and ending the experiment. The experiment was actually testing whether the residents would comply with an immoral order from an authority figure, or stand up and refuse. They complied for years, and hundreds died for nothing. Vault-Tec didn't run these experiments purely out of sadism. They ran them because they and the Enclave genuinely believed they were going to inherit the world, and they wanted to solve the problems of long-term human survival, from cryosleep to social engineering, before anyone else could. But the cruelty was the method, and the method was the point. And the faction that inherited Vault-Tec's shadow? Worse. The Enclave are descendants of the pre-war United States government and military, formed as a secretive organization with the goal of preserving the purity of humanity after the devastation of nuclear war. They consider themselves the rightful heirs to the United States and seek to rebuild the nation according to their own ideals. Noble enough on paper. Except their definition of pure humanity excludes everyone who wasn't sealed in an Enclave facility before the bombs fell. The Enclave apparently didn't learn from history that purity-based ideology isn't the best move. Their favorite pastimes include human experimentation, weaponizing the forced evolutionary virus to kill all irradiated life on Earth, and the genocide of all non-Enclave humans, since the Enclave are, in their own view, the only true humans left. They also experimented extensively on death claws. In Fallout 2, they injected death claws with FEV to increase their intelligence, attempting to create controllable, expendable soldiers. The death claws gained more intelligence than intended, realized they were destined for slavery, and played dumb until they could escape. In Fallout 3, the Enclave used mind control devices on death claws at their bases. It's worth noting that death claws themselves were originally created by the pre-war United States government from mixed animal stock, not by the Enclave. The Enclave just made them worse. They're not rebuilding America. They're building a replacement for it, populated exclusively by themselves. Alright, less overt genocide, more complicated hypocrisy. Let's talk about the Brotherhood of Steel. The Brotherhood of Steel was originally comprised of American soldiers assigned to the Mariposa military base in California. Captain Roger Maxson discovered that the West Tech scientists stationed there were using military prisoners as involuntary test subjects for the forced evolutionary virus. Horrified, Maxson executed the lead scientist and eventually all the researchers, declared his unit in full secession from the United States, and after the bombs fell, led his people on an exodus to the Lost Hills government bunker. There, he founded the Brotherhood of Steel. In its earliest years, the Brotherhood focused on helping Great War survivors and protecting civilians. But Maxson soon recognized that humanity's collective knowledge was at risk of disappearing entirely, and he pivoted the order toward the preservation of technology, gathering and safeguarding it so it could never be used to cause another Armageddon. He wanted the Brotherhood to be a guardian order, one that would protect civilization, not isolate itself from it. Genuinely noble origin, tragic execution. Because here's what happened. After Maxson died of cancer in 21 2135, his son Maxim II took over and supported isolationism, ending outside recruitment entirely. Over time, the Brotherhood stopped being about protecting humanity from technology and started being about protecting technology from humanity. They hoard power armor and energy weapons like a dragon sitting on a pile of gold, refusing to share anything with the settlements dying around them. Most chapters won't hand over the technology they've salvaged and fought for to help rebuild a new America. They've mostly shown themselves to be aloof, absentee overlords. Maxim wanted a guardian order. What emerged in most incarnations is closer to an armed museum that occasionally does community service by shooting super mutants. The East Coast chapter under Elder Lyons tried to course correct. Lyons recognized the super mutants were a massive threat and diverted significant chapter resources to protecting settlements. It wasn't a popular move. By the time the Lone Wanderer arrived, the chapter had been disavowed by the West Coast Elders, and a splinter faction known as the Outcasts had formed. So even the Brotherhood's one real attempt at being genuinely heroic fractured their organization from the inside. Speaking of fracturing things from the inside, the Institute. The Institute's goal is to create a synthetic workforce for what they frame as the betterment of mankind. They're also working to build a nuclear reactor to become fully self-sustained and outlive the people on the surface, who they believe will eventually destroy themselves. In their view, it will be up to the Institute's human population to start over, using their synthetic workforce for all the heavy lifting and protection. So the Institute's plan is to sit underground, wait for the surface to sort itself out, and then emerge to inherit a clean wasteland with an army of synthetic workers who have no rights and no choice. Not every member of the Institute shares this vision. Father, the Institute's leader in Fallout 4, genuinely believes the surface is beyond saving, but dissent exists within the organization. The institution as a whole, however, operates on the assumption that the surface population is expendable. They see themselves as scientists, visionaries, the last hope for human advancement. They see everyone else as a problem that time will eventually solve for them. The Railroad exists specifically because of the Institute. With ideals opposite to the Brotherhood of Steel, the Railroad is a modernization of the historical Underground Railroad. They believe synths deserve a proper life and have developed secret systems for liberating and freeing them from both Institute and Brotherhood scrutiny. Their agenda is the most straightforwardly humane of any faction in Fallout 4, which is also why they're the most fragile. An organization built entirely around protecting one specific category of being, operating in complete secrecy, recruiting carefully, operating on the assumption that the moment they're exposed, they're finished. And they're right, now. The New California Republic. Modeled after the pre-war American government, the New California Republic is the continuation of the spirit of the American dream, for better and for worse. That phrase, for better and for worse, is doing a staggering amount of work. The NCR genuinely wants democracy, trade, law, and human rights. They also want expansion, constantly. The more time you spend around the NCR, the more apparent it becomes that they're woefully under-equipped to protect the Mojave. NCR outposts are constantly short on supplies, and dialogue with certain members reveals that supply lines are under immense strain. The Mojave is just one of many frontiers the NCR is struggling to maintain. They're not a democracy managing its reach. They're a democracy that has outgrown its own ability to function, dragging its ideals behind it like a banner it can no longer hold upright. Which brings us to Caesar's Legion. The faction everyone writes off as cartoon villains until someone actually explains what Caesar thinks he's doing. The bedrock of Caesar's philosophy is that service to the state is not just the highest virtue, it is the only virtue. Caesar is critical of NCR society because its leaders care not for the greater good. Caesar, born Edward Sallow, was a member of the followers of the apocalypse who encountered tribal societies in the wasteland and became deeply influenced by historical texts about the Roman Empire. He came to believe that Rome's highly militarized autocracy, adept at integrating conquered cultures, was the perfect template for a society that could survive the post-apocalyptic world. When he later observed the NCR's bureaucratic sprawl and internal corruption, it only confirmed his belief that democracy is just organized decay. Caesar desires two things, a Carthage and a Rome. In the NCR, he found a great adversary, against which he could wage a military campaign worthy of history books. And in New Vegas, powered and watered by its great dam, he found a capital worthy of a Caesar. By seizing it, he felt he could finally elevate his legion from a nomadic army into a true empire, a militaristic, imperialist, autocratic, culturally homogenous state whose ruler holds undisputed power, a Pax Romana that would prevent humanity from ever fracturing itself again. He's not evil because he enjoys cruelty, he's evil because he genuinely believes cruelty is the cost of preventing something worse. And then there's Mr. House, Who might be the most honest faction leader in the entire franchise, which is somehow still alarming? Mr. House's ultimate goal is to safeguard New Vegas and ensure its continued prosperity, viewing the city as his legacy and the key to rebuilding civilization. He says this out loud, directly to your face. What he doesn't emphasize is that his version of civilization centers entirely on him, living forever in a life support machine, directing a Securitron army, on the assumption that his vision for humanity is simply correct and no one else needs to be consulted. For Mr. House, Vegas is a beacon of the old world. Having worked so hard to preserve it when the Great War sparked, he continues working to save the city. He's not rebuilding the world. He's preserving his specific piece of it and hoping the world eventually aligns with his standards. Here's what all of these factions actually share underneath their very different flags and rhetoric. Every single one of them is responding to the same trauma. The world ended, billions died, and each faction looked at the ashes and asked the same question: how do we make sure this never happens again? Vault-Tec answered with control, the Enclave answered with purity, the Brotherhood answered with hoarding, the Institute answered with isolation, the NCR answered with democracy, Caesar answered with iron, Mr. House answered with himself. None of them are entirely wrong about the problem. All of them are at least partially wrong about the solution. That's the genius of Fallout as a universe. It doesn't give you a correct answer. It gives you a fractured world full of people who are absolutely certain they have one. If you enjoyed this video and want to see every Vault experiment explained, click the video on screen.